It is now my pleasure to welcome one of the year's finalist judges for fiction. She is the Briggs Copeland Lecturer in Fiction at Harvard University. She's the author of 2 novels, a collection of short stories. Here to present this year's winner for fiction is Katherine Vaz.
My 3rd year here, and you get to kiss Nick Clooney, which is not bad. It's a distinct honor to be here with you once again to celebrate the power of books to remake our world. I want to thank Sharon and Mark and everyone who's chosen to mark and uplift Dayton's role in advancing the cause of global peace. And one thing I've noticed about, because I've been lucky enough to be a fiction judge for the last 3 years, and this is probably my last year doing that, is that the books tend to be about enormous global issues, as they should be. But they also have an undercurrent of how peacemaking happens on a day-to-day basis for those of us who aren't asked to do big things in the world. It's about the small things that afflict us in terms of jealousy and envy and gossip and undercutting each other on a small daily basis as well. And I'm always struck by books that feed that into the bigger issues so that none of us are free of having to address ourselves to what peace really means in our lives in a day-to-day basis. But that aside, I'm really extremely delighted to introduce the 2010 Dayton Fiction Prize winner, Marlon James, whose novel, The Book of Night Women, is a harrowing, unforgettable journey into the history of slavery in Jamaica in the 18th century, told from the point of view of Lilith, half black and half white. Both poet and reporter, the author has conceived of the entire story in patois as he traces the stages of a slave uprising, a feat that pays off. Readers fall easily into the slipstream of the color and cadence, and the result is a seamless marvel of artistry. This is a work of supreme literary quality, daring to transform language into such an original realm that readers come away haunted, short of breath, and staggered with the sort of visceral impact that reminds us of why we read, not merely to understand other lives or worlds, but to feel them. Though James truly earns the sometimes overused phrase, unflinching gaze, the book's handling of violence shies away from being leering or gratuitous, even as we sense that he's duty-bound to report the truth of oppression as it historically occurred. This is fiction's power, to conjure through character and story not just the details of human horrors, but also how their truth plays out upon the skin, against the backdrop of the world, and upon the hidden emotions of us all. There is no hiding in any era, even one removed from the time being scrutinized. One of the most remarkable qualities of this novel is the careful layering of all classes and types. It will occur to readers that they have perhaps never read a book about slavery in which slaves themselves are portrayed as prone to jealousy, nastiness, vulgarity, and ruthlessness, as normal beings normally can be, especially when trapped in a system that twists the human spirit. Lilith, our heroine, is not always likable, and the slaves elevated to the foreman-like role of being Johnny Jumpers add complications to any desire to classify the portraits easily. We witness the self-interest of the Maroons and Robert Quinn's frustration as an Irishman considered lower class. We flinch, though not completely devoid of sympathy, at selfish slave-owning Miss Isabel's mad attempts to leap over the gulf of what she views as the other side. Robert Quinn's desire of Lilith, fueled in part by his own status as an outsider, is tense from start to finish. And in addition to blending the poetry in the service of vivid storytelling power and sturdy pacing, we arrive at the cry for peace that makes the book worthy of this award. We're given examples of how ordinary people in extraordinarily vicious circumstances can reach out, can stop the torrential demands of old hatred and old history. Though it's chilling and believable that Quinn, outside the house, disavows Lilith to the point of allowing her to be whipped to near death, the gift of his love in private surely plays a role in her decision when riots engulf Jamaica to see her white father not as cruel and despicable, but as a man frightened to death, and she stays to defend him. Quinn will lose his life due to the forces unleashed, but he has, despite his sins, put forth a measure of redemptive healing care into an ill world. It is worth recalling that the novel is based upon the implacably awful truths of the treatment of slaves. There's no way to make this material less than the ghastly nightmare that it is. If we need to be reminded of who we've been, we also can take some solace in discovering that the human spirit can find back even in the most poisonous of circumstances. This is a prime definition of courage. And the book paints a stunning and detailed map of how we divide ourselves from one another, not merely in slavery, but in any group, any social network, any gathering where envy or jealousy lurks. And this makes this book not just about a bygone era, but about ourselves. In keeping with the idea of a peace award, author Marlon James also gives us examples of people deciding that even if the power of love cannot always defeat the forces of history, it absolutely transforms our spirits and maybe our souls, and thereby makes smoother the path of those who follow. Into the human record, the courage to reach out etches examples of how we might work our ways through to each other and across and beyond. So it's with great pleasure I introduce Marlon James.
First and foremost, thank you all for coming, and thank you all for welcoming me to Dayton. I feel so at home. You should be warned, Jamaicans have a way of claiming spaces that they visit. And the Jamaica Dayton Association will be open any minute now. First, thanks. You don't think that way when we force you to eat jerk chicken. First and foremost, I just want to thank the co-chairs, Sharon and Mark, for building this event and for creating this award, and to Katherine for that really lovely speech, and to the judges, the nominating academy, to the sponsors, the benefactors, volunteers, to the student volunteers. I'm a teacher. I love to volunteer students to do work. So thank you all. You know, Chimamanda Adichie, who was a runner-up in this prize, a great novelist and story writer, she spoke at the TED lecture about the danger of the single story. And one of the great things about this prize and about the Dayton in general is that that's one thing you're never in danger of falling into. That you have recognized the power of the multiple stories, and the celebration of the multiple stories, and prizes like these and the book culture, which you notice. An author can smell book culture because we know when it's not there. So that to recognize that and to see that is really, really powerful and really, really humbling. That you realize that even one, recognize the different ways in which we tell stories, but also that we ultimately talk about the triumphs and the failures of the human spirit. And I just want to take a moment to appreciate being in the company of the lovers of books. Because, you know, people who celebrate stories that need to be told and need to be heard. And some might question why such a prize, why a literary peace prize, and if you're going to give a literary peace prize, why not stick to less complex, less ambivalent, less difficult books? And why not books with easy answers? The thing is, peace is not an easy question. So it's actually an insult to peace and to the peace process to not recognize differences, ambivalence, and deep conflicts. And I really congratulate the Dayton committee. I looked at the long list, and the list of books that were there is pretty staggering. I have no idea what you guys were thinking when you made me win. Joan Didion says, we tell stories in order to live. And I would add that we tell stories in order to live with each other. That beyond tolerance to appreciation and even empathy. And that's why a literary peace prize is so important, because books can do that. Books can be an engine of empathy. A writer is weird. A writer is a particular kind of thief. And we go in and snatch things from dark places and we bring them to light and hope people read them, hope people shine focus on stories that are not always told, or sometimes not told in the right way. We bear witness and we speak truth to power. We hope to. And while we're on the power, I've spoken, since I've been here, I've spoken about books that I fell in love when I discovered books, and books that I fell in love with. But what I haven't spoken about much is books where when I realized that literature had power. When I realized that literature had the power to change things. And there are quite a few. Because of Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, none of us will die tonight because of the meat we ate. Uncle Tom's Cabin, the Rachel Carson's The Silent Spring. We know that Eudora Welty's story, Where Is This Voice Coming From?, was a first-person narrative of somebody. She did a reimagining of who killed Medgar Evers. And it was a first-person story, and we know that. But what you might not know is that the FBI used that story to profile the killer. And that's how he was caught. So stories can still change lives, and stories can still work in really miraculous ways that you may not know. The Color Purple, for me, ignited dialogue between men and women where they talk to each other instead of at each other or even about each other. That even, Geraldine's novel March can pull this really, really unique trick of going forward and backward at the same time. And there's a lesson in both movements. And that Dave's story, Zaytoon, can make us all sort of stop dead in our tracks and really consider what it means to be a fellow American. And this is why books are important, and what a novel, or a nonfiction book can contribute to the peace process. Books are important if, for no other reason, enemies of peace already know their power. When the oppressors come, they burn the books first, because they realize something. There's a section in my book that I read today that's about two slaves discovering the power of reading. And that scene came to me because of a speech Jeanette Winterson made years ago. And she says, the danger about books, why it scares the enemies of peace, is that reading is an act of free will. And it's a private act. And in the opening of a book is the opening of a world of possibility. And those who are against peace, those who are against freedom, those who are against that sort of free will are scared at the idea of someone becoming liberated under the covers of their own bed sheet. It's a pretty powerful thing that a book can totally change the world or change the mind, and nobody knows but the person who read it. These sort of mini private revolutions that's happening. And fiction and nonfiction both speak truth. Both are in dialogue, and both begin conversations that end and hopefully begin again when the reader reads and the reader understands. The great thing about a prize like this is that it dares to fight oppression, it dares to fight ignorance, and it dares to fight the worst enemy of the lot, which is cynicism. by daring to suppose that literature can make a difference. And I know that personally because I literally wrote my way here. That the only tool I had to go from where I was to where I'm at was a really broken laptop and a pen. And that was the only thing I had. And I have to believe that literature can change the world and change the way we think. Because I'm a teacher and I teach students, and some of them have no hope other than the fact that, or the possibility that they can write their way out of where they're at to where they want to be. And there's quite nothing like a 17-year-old, an 18-year-old, a 19-year-old believing that they can write a poem that can take them somewhere else, that they can actually tap into that thing that gives them the greatest joy, and that can lead to some sort of award. So I am ultimately very, very, very humbled to receive this award. I still think surely there was somebody else. But I'm also challenged, and I'm glad to be challenged, if for no other reason that I think sometimes novelists, certainly more so than nonfiction writers sometimes, are guilty of staring at their belly buttons for an awful time. And it's a great thing to be reminded that every now and then I should look outside my window. And I take that from Dayton and I take it back to wherever my next writing desk is going to be. And I am just so honored and so floored. And thank you very much.